Food for thought. We are 95% of the way-ish through week 6. And we're coming live at you about 3 o'clock here on the East Coast. I am the Luch. I am here with Chief Justice, Mr. Will Priester. What's going on?
Nothing much. Doing good. Another week of football is behind us. We got a chance to find out a few more things about each team from a real-life perspective, a fantasy perspective. And so, as we continue to progress, I definitely think there are some emerging trends happening week to week. I think there's some, opportunities for us to buy into some offenses and buy into the fact that some defenses are actually not really good. And as those things continue to materialize, Luch, we get options for DFS, and that's the name of the game in DFS, right? Just exploiting the right matchup every week. And sometimes that matchup might be the one that nobody's actually talking about. So that's the cool thing about DFS. We all have our quirks and ideologies, and, things come together for us at the right time. And, perhaps one day it comes together in the right Millie Maker build, and we enter that $1 million stratosphere from a DFS standpoint. So I'm excited, and I know everybody doesn't play the Millie. I actually didn't play the Millie this week. I thought I was going to go mass multi-entry, Luch, and I actually just ended up doing single entry. I had a really busy weekend, like Saturday into Sunday, and it was one of those weeks where I said, you know what? I kind of started building Saturday night, and I thought I was going to get the mass multi-entry. I just didn't have it in me, man. It was one of those weeks I just didn't have it in me, and I just ended up going single entry. I hand built 4 or 5 teams on FanDuel and called it a week. Got heavy in the prop streets, but all in all, glad to come on, glad to talk through it, glad to review it, right? And then also glad to look ahead, man. I think there's some interesting matchups coming up this week.
For sure. We got a lot to talk about. I'm going to get through these reads real quick. RG Combo Lite, our new Combo Lite, newest product, power of simulation for a fraction of the price of other tools. Competitors charge hundreds a month for their sim products. Combo Lite is just $39.99. It includes SimLab's lineup building tool, plus content from your favorite DFS analysts. Doesn't limit you. 4 major sports, SimLabs access: MLB, NFL, NBA, and PGA. NBA is right around the corner, Chief. Right around the corner, and that's where we began our food for thought family storytelling time together in the bubble, which seems like kind of yesterday, but at the same sense, it feels like 20 years ago. What a weird time it was. But Combo Lite, check it out. SimLabs, $39.99. The core 4 major sports right at your fingertips. Great price for an amazing product. And of course, Splash Sports, Pick'em contest, Survivor pools. Splash is available in 34 states. Promo code ROTO10, that's ROTO10. You can redeem $10 in credits after you enter your first contest over there on Splash Sports. Check it out, splashsports.com/RotoGrinders. And each week, you can join in the RG Listener League, play alongside as other viewers, as well as your favorite hosts. Compete for a chance at first. You'll have a chance every week to grab first place and a shot at a month of RG Combo Premium. Check the description for an invite to the contest when it goes live every single Wednesday. So, who was cooking? Well, Bucky Irving was a quote-unquote right play. He was fine. Scored a touchdown in a game that at one point, I checked my phone, had a live total of 70.5. It was it's like Saturday night never ended. It felt like I was watching a West Coast college football game where there was literally no defense. But Sean Tucker, if you had your crystal ball or Dean's Magic 8-ball or something, perhaps I was a little early on Sean Tucker. I had 0. I didn't ever even consider Sean Tucker on Sunday. Last year, he had some camp buzz last season, and he just kind of didn't have it. I had a couple of shares laying around with Sean Tucker in best ball and some season-long stuff last season, but I did not consider his share of workload to be this big. I thought he would be much more of a complimentary piece on Sunday. I would say it surprised over 90% of people, most likely, but here we are. And he had over 30 DraftKings points, and a couple people played him in the million. Boy, did he give you a sick ROI. So big tip of the cap to those who rolled the dice on Sean Tucker on Sunday. What are your thoughts on Sean Tucker and that game collectively?
Well, what I want to say is, it's going to sound weird. Kudos to the Saints, right? Like, they pushed the Buccaneers just enough for the Bucs to just keep rolling, right? Like, they pushed them early. So let me just say, for those of you that played Sean Tucker, I got to hand it to him, Luke. Definitely the right call. Here's what I mean by the right call. I'm not saying surface level it looked like the right call. I'm saying you're in a situation that's unknown. And what do we talk about with DFS? If you're comfortable enough to lean into the unknown and play a guy like Sean Tucker, when everybody and their mom, including me, we all thought Bucky Irving was maybe going to be it's going to be an 80-20 split, right? Like we're thinking, hey, he's been the backup. He's going to step into this monster role. And I'm not saying he won't next week if for some reason, the starters. I'm saying this week, you roll the dice on Sean Tucker, it pays off big for you. And if you integrated that into just a Buccaneer stack in general, like along with Chris Godwin, who I did like this week, it paid tremendous dividends for you. So I mean, look, man, like I said, kudos to everyone that played Sean Tucker. And obviously, it paid off big time. And once again, the Buccaneers were cooking 51 points in a league where we're saying we're saying, hey, maybe we were starting to get back to 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and maybe not quite 3 yards in a cloud of dust, Luke. But we're saying, hey, the league is slowing down. We're not throwing the ball as much. And maybe we aren't. But the Buccaneers keep scoring points. The Lions keep scoring points. I know we'll get to this game. The Ravens and the Commanders keep scoring points. The Bears all of a sudden know how to score points. Like, points are the Falcons lose. And we talked about the Falcons continuing to take off, are continuing to score points. Points are being scored in the NFL, even if it may look a little different than what we've been accustomed to from a theory perspective over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and on the flip side, Spencer Rattler, Rashid Shaheed keeps finding the end zone. Punt return for a touchdown this week. Guy's a monster. Bub Means, 71% of the snaps, more than Mason Tipton, more than Cedric Wilson, and that's because Chris Olave, concussion, Marvin Harrison, concussion, more big names, going down. Dallas Goedert, was it a hamstring? So I know I'm jumping around here, but Bub Means tied for a team high in targets with Alvin Kamara with 8. So he is clearly a name to monitor going forward, along with the status of Chris Olave. But, they were forced to throw the ball. There's no way in hell that the New Orleans Saints wanted Spencer Rattler to throw the ball 40 times in his first career NFL start, right? So I don't even know who's on the schedule next. We'll get into it for the look ahead, but I am just
It's the Broncos,
guessing.
if you must know. They're playing the Broncos. Broncos are coming to them. It's a Thursday night game, though, so we don't have to worry about it.
Not on the main slate. Good.
Yeah.
Because that just screams ugly. It screams overreaction. You're not going to get that same type of game. The Broncos are most likely not going to, throttle ahead for a 3-touchdown lead if they even scored 3 touchdowns in the game and force, New Orleans to kind of air it out. Interesting game for, in terms of young quarterbacks going at it, but just probably isn't going to be the most aesthetically pleasing on Thursday Night Football. Anyway, Chris Olave, big name to monitor. Bub Means, if you're in season long or whatever, playing showdown, we'll have to see. But just a crazy game. You had the Tampa Bay chalk defense getting a defensive touchdown as well. And
listen, I was
a lot of action in that game.
It's because they were cheap. If they would have been 4K or like 4K on or 3,800 4K and maybe 5K on FanDuel, I don't think people would have been as interested. But they were 2,600 on DraftKings and like 3,700 on FanDuel this week. So I had a ton of the Buccaneers defense, and it's just experienced defense facing a rookie quarterback. I also had a ton of the Houston defense. An experienced defense facing Drake May, another rookie quarterback that hadn't really played as much this season. So that was kind of the approach I took this week. I know, defense isn't something that I just sit there and worry about. but I do try to seize those moments. Like you've got a rookie quarterback, starting, maybe didn't have enough time to get ready. Like defenses do tend to feast in those situations.
Can I jump somewhere else? And then we
Please,
will
let's
keep
man.
moving. Can we talk Eagles for like 90 seconds or 2 minutes?
Absolutely.
Listen, ton of talent. Kellen Moore is not really running this Kellen Moore offense that we're accustomed to seeing. Things are not the same. The Eagles.
Why
the
is
Eagles,
that though? Because the weapons are there. Why is that?
I don't have the answers, but the Eagles just they got the win, right? But it was a lot closer than it had to be. They keep beating themselves. A blocked field goal returned. It was like a freaking Charlie Brown. Laces were in. I don't even know who was holding, but he gave the kicker the laces. And, this team shoots themselves in the foot. And the Birds fans that are listening know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know why, Jalen Hurts at this time has so much rapport with his guys, with his team, and they're coming off a bye week. I just expected a little more. That being said, the one thing I was ecstatic about, and also at the same time, it was a little bit as Luch shooting himself in the foot. We were on crunch time yesterday, and I said, the one guy I am terrified of not having is A.J. Brown. And I was multitasking on crunch time, and maybe if I thought about it a little more, I would have reworked some things. But I liked what I had. This guy came right in. He looked like he didn't miss a beat. He looked like A.J. Brown from week 1, 59% air yard share, 36% target share, and he just transforms offenses. And just my last point is, you're probably not going to get him at 7% again every week, whatever we had him projected at anymore. But he just transforms an offense. Obviously, the good Titans teams of a few years ago when they were the 1 seed, etc., Derrick Henry is a Hall of Fame running back. But A.J. Brown transformed that offense with the ability to take the top off, draw a ton of bracket coverage his way, and just a totally different game plan. He does the same thing for this Eagles team. He is, I think, the most important piece to this Eagles team on either side of the ball. And it's awesome to see him just balling out. He had some great catches, and he looked like himself. So I don't know. It's just it's like the same thing with the Eagles. They just keep finding a way to like not play 4 quarters, and they have all the talent in the world. Nick Sirianni getting a lot of crap. Don't love this move on his part. Decided to bring his kids to the post-game press conference and like get all emotional about how much it's like, dude. Can't use your kids as like a shield for the press. Like, talk to your kids after the press conference here. He was like yelling at the fans after they got the win.
Yeah.
Bad vibes, man. I don't know.
Listen, the Eagles fans are going to be tough on Sirianni. Here's the bottom line, Luch. What's the Eagles' record right now?
3-2.
They're 3-2. They should beat the Cowboys this year. They'll. Debatable maybe with the Giants, maybe they, you know what I'm saying? But I think they'll get the Giants. They probably split with Washington. That's my read. As bad as, as much as we're complaining about the Eagles, it could be a lot worse. They could be the Cowboys. They're not winning pretty, but they're still winning some games. They're still above 500, Luch. And I don't think they come out of the NFC to go to the championship. But if they can get rolling at the right time, who knows what happens with this team. They've got too many weapons now on offense for this to not work. We're talking about Kellen Moore's offense. Is Jalen Hurts the problem? We don't know. Is Kellen Moore's offense not as good as we think it is? I don't know because clearly he has the weapons to get it done. My larger point is, as bad as we think the Eagles are, they're still probably going to the playoffs. Well, I take that back. Let me say this, Luch. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I'm going to parlay this into a different style of what's cooking. Can the NFC North get 4 teams in? Is that possible? That's to me, that's who's cooking. It's the NFC North. You've got the Lions, you've got the Vikings, you've got the Packers, and don't look now, but the Bears start to just wallop people. Okay, they played some bad teams here on a stretch. I get it. But what do we talk about, Luch? Win the games you're supposed to win, right? Caleb Williams seems to be getting better week to week. And if he just keeps getting better, keeps the turnovers down, I mean, I think clearly right now, doesn't the NFC North get 3 teams in the playoffs? If we had to guess, they get 3 in with a possible 4 after they beaten up on each other in the division.
You're right.
Is that what we're
The
saying?
Bears are beating the snot out of bad teams, and that's who was on their schedule. You're right. At the same time, who's not cooking? Like the Jaguars are just a glutton for punishment. I mean, they ran 44% of man coverage again in week 6. They keep just running man coverage at this high rate and getting absolutely dismantled every week, no matter who they play. Can't we just switch it up a little bit? I mean, I know we got a first-year DC there in Jacksonville, I believe. Who is it again? I'm drawing a blank. Ryan Nielsen, right? Yeah,
I don't know.
You can't consistent. I guess there's a reason why. But again, you can't just run 40% of man coverage every freaking week in this league and expect to get stops. It's just unheard of. And let's end that experiment. But kudos to Caleb Williams and the Jags. Consolation prize, you get to stay in London for another week. So things are just not great. Doug Peterson said after the game that he thinks there needs to be a culture change in Jacksonville. Is he trying to get himself canned? Like, is he trying to get relieved of his duties? Maybe they'll just leave him in London. I don't know.
That may in fact be the case, Luch. May in fact be the case. He's trying to get himself canned. He's tired of his dumb job. I'm kidding. I don't think he's tired of the job.
Go do what you're good at. Go be an elite offensive coordinator somewhere, or just retire and ride off into the sunset.
Man, I'm not going to get into this because I've talked about this, right? Like,
right. Of course.
Like when so sometimes you're a really good coordinator, and that may be the way that you're going to support your family. Like, especially after you've tried to be a head coach on multiple occasions. Like, especially after you've tried, you know what I mean? Like, maybe that ship has passed. But what hasn't changed is the fact that you're able to put together quality offensive performances. Now, we're not seeing that from Doug Peterson the way we want this season. Obviously, after 35-16 shellacking in his other home field of London for the Jags. But maybe if they just take away some of that responsibility, he could get back to being a really good coordinator. I'm not asking for him to be fired right now. I think there's some other things that have gone wrong with this team.
There's a lot.
Yeah. I'm not personally blaming all of this on Doug Peterson because Trevor Lawrence is looking like he's going backward also. Like, it's just, you know what I'm saying? This team is moving.
And for that reason.
Life comes at you fast.
For that reason also, trade deadline's coming up. Travis Etienne is considered week to week now after he got hurt. Dearness Johnson got a lot of work. Tank Bigsby's looked better this year. He got some work. Travis Etienne has 1 year left on his deal. Is he going to be a name to monitor? DeAndre Hopkins sticking in the AFC South. Listen, I want to hear your outsider perspective. I know how I feel about the Tennessee Titans and where things are and what's going on. But can you play the blame game with the Titans? And what's your analysis of their issues? Sticking with teams in the AFC South who have plenty of problems for 300, Chief.
Right.
Chief
let me say this. I want to comment on something Richie said, and Javon, I agree. Like, Saquon needs to be like the big bad wolf in this when he faces the Giants. Like, everybody just get out of the way. Let the man get his silent revenge, and we move on to the next week. Javon, I agree with you, brother.
Love that.
I agree 100%. Just for the sports, like just for the sport of it, like nothing to do with DFS for me. Listen, if I'm Saquon, and I'm coming to you, Richie, after we saw this Hard Knocks clip and how they handled this situation, and he goes to the Eagles, if I'm the Eagles, I'm saying, hey, everybody remember this Hard Knocks clip? Saquon's getting the game ball today. If we got to make sure he gets the game ball. Like, no matter what, he's getting it. Okay, enough with that. Richie Smalls, good quote here from Richie. He says, Bill O'Brien, good coordinator, terrible coach. Richie, I mean, that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Yeah. And if you've tuned into our show in previous years, we talk about this a lot. Some guys are just great at what they do, and maybe they're not made up for the HC role. And we talked a lot. We had the offseason show, and we talked a lot about these guys. Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, Canales going to Carolina, the young stud offensive play callers, and the revolving door of coordinators is often a death trap for these quarterbacks going through multiple systems. Everyone wants that continuity. You want that head coach that's young, that also calls plays, that also has a stranglehold on the locker room that's going to be there for 10 to 15 years. It's hard to get the total package and get it right. That's why I think these guys like Mike Vrabel don't have a job right now, because he needs that offensive coordinator. Cool. A guy like Mike Vrabel gets a good gig. You get a quarterback. You bring in an OC. 2 years, maybe that OC gets poached. You bring in a whole new system for this quarterback to learn again. You're kind of taking a risk of taking a big step backwards for the following year.
Okay, and let's talk about that as we parlay that into Tennessee. Because I think that, so, Luke, I'm going to give you some non-biased Tennessee Titans analysis here. And I'm going to do it the way they do it in education. So in education, typically they want to give out all the good things and then kind of move to the bad things, so the bad things can be a little bit more palatable. And I know yesterday we've got Calvin Ridley sounding off about why didn't he get more targets at the beginning of the game. And I think rightfully so, that's the correct approach. You heard the guys on ESPN this morning, Luce, they brought up a valid point, which is the point I always bring up when I talk about this stuff. Why do you pay him $92 million and then you don't throw him the football? It makes no sense to me if you're not going to throw it to him early. But hey, whatever. Here are the good things, Luch. I feel like from a personnel standpoint on offense, they've tried to make the right moves. Now, everybody could use one or two better offensive linemen. Sometimes that group just has to grow together. You got to draft well, and then maybe you go out like the Rams did, and you go and get one really good veteran offensive lineman that can just pull this thing together. And that's what the Rams did when they drafted, and then they went and got, oh my gosh, what's his name? He's a commentator now. One of the best linemen in football at the time. He does Thursday Night Football with Sherm in the game. Anyway, I can't remember his name right now. If somebody remembers it, throw it in the chat. I'll bring it up. But here's some sneaky good things that they've done. They went and got, and I'm going to start at Wentworth. Thank you, Richie. Wentworth. They went and got Wentworth. And
Richie's on fire in the chat today.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, brought that offensive line together. I think something similar happened here in San Francisco, despite what they look like right now, going to get Tyrus Smith. I think that was where did Tyrus Smith go to the 49ers? I think that's where he went. Sneaky good signing there, getting an aging offensive line that can help hold the line together. So I think Tennessee, I think everybody could always use one really, really good offensive. Jets, that's where it is. Thank you, Richie. The Jets. He's crushing it today. We need to get you live on the show. Rich, if you've got a feed, send us an email. We might just need to put you up on the screen. But my larger point is this. I think they had some sneaky good signings. So when you go out and you sign DeAndre Hopkins, Luch, I think what you're saying is you want to try to find ways to get your offense going, because you do have to score points in this league, right? Okay. They go ahead and make the switch. They say, okay, Will Levis is now our guy. He's a young guy. Let's see what he has. And they went through that process last season. Now they're going through it this season. And they don't seem to be trying to find ways to get rid of him. They seem to be giving him his chance to take his lumps. Then they go out and get Calvin Ridley, right? You say, okay, who else has done something similar? The Bears have done something similar, right? They went and got DJ Moore. Caleb Williams wasn't starting, but they went and got him for Justin Fields. They moved on from Fields, and then what did they do when they moved on? And they said, we're going to get another young quarterback. They added more. They added Keenan Allen, right? They went and got Romo Dunze in the draft. They went and got DeAndre Swift, off the market. So they're trying to find ways to complement their young quarterback. Okay? Believe it or not, Luch, Tennessee has done something similar. They got Hopkins last year. They say, okay, we're committing to Levis. Levis is our guy. What do? They go and get Ridley. They go out and get Tyler Boyd also. Nice slot veteran receiver. Guy that can come in and help you move the chains, make some critical catches.
Lloyd Cushenberry.
They go out and get Tony Pollard to add to the running back room, which I know we're used to seeing Derrick Henry, but for all intents and purposes, Tony Pollard has probably been their best offensive player, hands down, this season.
Yep.
So, Luch, they've done the right things.
I agree.
The,
So
they're
I've seen
better
all I
right
need
now.
to see, and they first time head coach who also calls the plays. And I will say this. I think I'm officially out on Will Levis. Call it what you want. My flag's at half mast here in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. That's fine. That's fine. But I saw all I needed to see after the Jets game. I mean, you got a guy who just – I feel like last year we saw Will Levis who was the quarterback who was the best athlete on the field. Now it feels like he's the best athlete on the field trying to play quarterback. And I think we're seeing some regression to who Will Levis
We are seeing regression.
was on tape. And I think maybe the tape was right. The tape won. And, he still threw a bunch of high turnover worthy plays last season. And I think we're seeing some regression. And listen, Ridley had 8 targets and only 2 of them were catchable. I saw Brian Callahan's press conference. He said, I'm calling plays downfield and the ball's not going there. So there's a lot of coach speak and a lot of things going on. And I think Callahan called a way too conservative game like he did against that brutal Miami game 2 weeks ago where he tried to protect Will Levis. Honestly, what's the point of trying to protect your guy when you're trying to find out who he is and you invested in all these pieces to try to develop him? He called such a bad game on his part as well. I would say I would give him like 30% of the blame and put 70 on Will Levis. It's the first game Tennessee hasn't given up a sack in 3 years, Chief, and they look brutal. 85 passing yards against the Colts, who are atrocious on defense. So I'm out on Will Levis. Brian Callahan didn't help him at all. I've seen enough, and I watched about 25 minutes of Shadur Sanders highlights yesterday on YouTube. So I guess I'm looking forward to April already, man.
Look, man, I mean, here's the deal. Can guys turn their careers around? Very seldom does this happen at the quarterback position, Luch. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there aren't a ton of Geno Smith stories walking around in the NFL. They just don't exist. So you better get this right. Well, let me say this. I feel like there are 2 come to mind, Luch, at the top, which to me tells me or should tell us how good these quarterbacks actually are for teams to not give up on them. There's Baker Mayfield and there's Geno Smith. And Sam Darnold. Correct. See, Richie's on it today. And Sam Darnold. Darnold, Baker, and Geno. Those are the guys, Luch, that have seemingly had the second chance career resurrection. As well as Joe Flacco's played, they still have him as a backup, right? Because he's old. But Flacco's fine with being a backup. He's paid his dues. He's made his money. He's perfectly fine to come in and save your season and sit on the bench the rest of the year. The man's 40 years old. He doesn't want to take all those hits, game to game to game. But my point is, Luch, Will Levis is running out of time. And if he can't find a way to figure it out, and I'm air quoting here, figure it out at quarterback, they're just going to draft another quarterback.
Of course they are. I hope they do.
The problem is
they do.
Now they've got these weapons that they're paying all this money, and they keep resetting the trigger man. I mean,
that's the problem.
DeAndre Hopkins, Willis was right.
Will should not be a Tennessee Titan in 4 weeks at this point.
Yeah.
Go get some draft capital. Now, but before we move on, let me do this, Chief. You're the Indianapolis Colts. You're calling the shots. You're 3-3 now. Your team is objectively better offensively with Joe Flacco. You kind of have a similar situation with, the few Tennessee Titans fans that are left in the world, including myself, calling for Mason Rudolph. Flacco is better than Mason Rudolph. What do you do now? You're 3-3. You're in the thick of it here. Do you go back to Anthony Richardson when healthy? I really thought he was going to play this week. And of course, it's a very controversial topic, but we saw Flacco come in and do this in Cleveland last year. And I bet you the Browns wish they stuck with him because what a shit show Deshaun Watson has been.
Here's what I think happens, Luch. You got a couple of things at work here, right? Because the Colts really aren't paying a lot of money at quarterback right now. You get what I'm saying? Because Anthony Richardson is still in his rookie deal. And they're not paying Joe Flacco $50 million. He's the backup, right? So they're paying him, but he's the backup. So at quarterback, they're really not spending a lot of money compared to the rest of the league. Here's the issue, though. At some point, when does the coach value his job more than he values quarterback development? Or when does the organization, rather, value winning more than quarterback development? Because as of right now, Anthony Richardson still needs more reps. He didn't complete a full season last year, and he's not going to complete a full season this year because he's already been hurt. You get what I'm saying? So when does the organization decide that, okay, we want to try to bring the fans some success here and get out of the rookie quarterback experiment? And I know he's not a rookie anymore. He's a sophomore. But to me, that's the juggling act. And I think right now, Luch, I think they're still in the middle of, let's see how much we can develop Anthony Richardson, who's shown promise when healthy. He's just got to cut down on some of the bad mistakes, but he's shown his athleticism. He's shown his arm strength, needs more accuracy, obviously. But if he can process the playbook well and process the coverages well, Luch, he can pick up accuracy just by analyzing the defense and knowing, hey, this is what's going on. I need to get into this type of play call, right? So those are the things that I think we're trying to figure out. But you don't have that issue with Joe Flacco. The coach is going to call something, and Joe's going to say, yeah, I got you, coach. And he's going to look out, and if he needs to change it, he'll change it because he's seen enough to diagnose what's happening and put his team in the right spot. They got a matchup with the Dolphins this week. I think they can win this game. I think they do it with Joe Flacco on a short week. And Richardson comes back the next week if that's the case.
I think it's long overdue for the organization to move on from Chris Ballard. I think it's just time. That's my opinion. We'll see. Short week, like you said, it'll be interesting to see what the call is there. Just a couple other guys who are cooking in terms of opportunities. Your guy, Zay Flowers, 34% target share. This is what he does. He runs little screens, little bubbles, small stuff. He only had an 18% air yard share. But of course, massive target share. That ranked third.
He got the volume finally.
Yeah,
but he's not going to get the volume every week, and we know this.
Drake London, 33% target share. George Pickens, he had 8 targets, didn't produce. A lot of drama going on there. CeeDee Lamb, ultimate trailing game script, 14 targets, 31% target share. David Njoku, God, Deshaun Watson stinks. What the Browns could be if they had some competent quarterback play as well.
Of course. Deshaun Watson, I mean, look, man, the kids have a saying now that this guy's dust, right? This guy is dust.
Is that a new phrase? Is that new lingo?
Yeah, you hear that. This guy is dust, meaning he's dead, right? Luch, Deshaun Watson's got to be dust, right? Like this is it. Like there's no coming back from this. I don't even know. I don't think there's any situation he can go to and help this team be better. Because that really, Luch, when you pay the quarterback excess of $200 million, $300 million, these big, guaranteed money contracts, you're saying this when you give them the money, Luch. The quarterback is going to elevate our team even when our team can't elevate itself, right? So why are we talking about this? Dak Prescott, same situation. Same situation for Deshaun. These guys aren't elevating. You want the contract? Okay, go and still help us win. Tom Brady, we can say all we want about Tom Brady. He didn't take the massive contracts every year. But when they gave him the money, Luch, what did they do? They wanted him to do more with less. And we say what we want, but he got it done. He got it done year after year after year. And did he win a Super Bowl every year? No. But what did he do? He had his team in a position to be successful. And what's happening with these quarterbacks is they're not even putting their teams in a position to be successful, Luch. Like they got these big contracts and they're not producing the way that for the reasons that the team gave them the money. So as we've talked about, there really aren't as many game changers at quarterback as it suggests, even though they're all getting paid big money.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend 20 minutes on every game, and I'd love to. But is there any other one you want to hop to? I have one more that I kind of want to briefly talk about. But
yeah, well, I'm going to talk about my Panthers and talk about the Falcons and talk about the fact that I've been saying this for the past 3 weeks on this show now, Luch, maybe 4. I think 3 weeks after week 2. Falcons are ascending. Offense started taking off, right? Started looking better. Kirk Cousins was moving better. He was putting the ball in the right spots. Receivers are getting hit downfield, right? Everybody's being productive. He's spreading the ball around, Luch. but you're still getting massive target share from London, massive target share from Mooney. Kyle Pitts has been serviceable. Obviously, Bijan and Algier do what, Luke? Torch the Carolina Panthers on the ground, which is what we've been talking about. The run defense there is just atrocious. Luke, secretly, the Falcons are a really good offense. And I think because of week one and how Kirk Cousins looked week one, maybe they tried to protect him a little bit and just kind of get him back in the flow of the game. But from week two on, we've seen this offense on an extreme incline. And I think we continue to see that. And this week, Luke, they get a matchup with the Seahawks at home. Seahawks are coming to town. I know we're not in look ahead, but I'm telling you right now, that game should be fireworks. One of the top games of the week, in my opinion.
I want to buy in. I want to buy in. And I'm not saying they're a bad offense. I feel like I know better by now that context matters. You're right. Week one, pass, right? That's fine. They edge out the Eagles in week two, 22 points. That's fine. 17 points against Kansas City. You see a 26 spot on the board against Saints. They didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game. Clearly, Tampa Bay is not a good defense. We know the Panthers are bad. No offense. So, but Luke, that being said, I think this is a really
22-17 Chiefs, who are the reigning champs, continually find ways to win. Look, man, I get it. I'm just saying there aren't too many more teams that they're going to play that's going to push them to the break. Look at their schedule.
Yeah.
Who's going to force this team or push this team to the break? I'll give you the schedule. They get the Seahawks at home. I think that game is very winnable. They've already beat the Buccaneers. Now they got to go into Tampa. I'm assuming they split. So let's just say Tampa wins that game. The Cowboys are coming to town. I don't think the Cowboys beat the Falcons right now. The Falcons go to the Saints. They've already beat the Saints when the offense wasn't really taking off, and now the offense is taking off. They got to go into Denver. I think that's a trap game, but we'll see. Right, going into Mile High for me, like at random points in the season, always feels like a trap game to me. Denver's defense has been fine. Their offense has been left a lot to be desired. They got the Chargers, they got the Vikings, they got the Raiders, they got the Giants, the Commanders, and then they get the Panthers last week of the season. And I mean, maybe they lose 3 of these last few games. Maybe. I'll give them 3 losses here out of this bunch, but they could very well win all of them. Look, that's what I'm saying with the Panthers. This schedule.
Like it, I'm just saying they've beaten up on bad teams, and they haven't really, pushed the needle for me against some formidable defenses. That being said, we talked about Seattle in the pod last week, and I said taking nothing away from the playmakers in that Seattle secondary with Witherspoon, etc. But Seattle, context also matters. They played a bunch of just anemic offenses in their own right the first couple of weeks. And what did New York do? Daniel Jones and company came to town, hung a decent number on them, almost scored 30 points. Daniel Jones looked competent in Seattle. The week before, the Lions kind of crapped on them, just like they did against the Cowboys, which we didn't even get into. So I do like the Falcons in this spot. If they were pretty popular on Sunday in terms of DFS. If Atlanta is not super popular on the main slate, I think they have a chance to put up a big number against Seattle because I just don't think that secondary is as good as whatever the public analysis might have been the first, 4 weeks of the season. I'm with you this week on Atlanta, and we'll do the look ahead. But do you have anything to say about the Cowboys in Detroit? I mean, oh man, what do you do, Mike McCarthy?
Good old-fashioned butt kicking. That's all it is.
Should Mike McCarthy been canned before we even hit record on this podcast? Do you think it just should have been a mid-season can job?
I don't think it's his fault. So here's the thing. I'm not saying Mike McCarthy is an elite coach, right? Like that. I'm not saying that. I also don't think he's as bad as the media tries to portray him to be. He can't really. We can't blame him for all the personnel decisions because clearly we know they don't let him make personnel decisions. But I mean, what do you want him to do with this team? Like, what do you want him to do?
Countless injuries, defensive side of the ball. Even if the defense was healthy, though, and shout out to our guy Eric Beinford, who was kind of beating this drum all summer, that hey, this offense might not be nearly as good as it was. You have no run game. You have zero run game. Clearly, Dowdle's not the answer. Zeke is washed, or dust, as you will. And you have one, all-world receiver in CD Lamb. And I like Jalen Tolbert a lot. I don't know if he is, a complimentary number 2 receiver in this league. I like Jake Ferguson. I just don't know if you can do enough with this offense. They're going to be forced to be one-dimensional, even in a neutral game script, because they can't run the ball and they can't stop a nosebleed on the other side. So what is the ceiling of this Dallas team? What are you playing for this year? I'm not sure. And I hate to sound so pessimistic, but it's really hard to find a sense of optimism with, some things that we've seen out of them earlier this year. Not only yesterday's game, they played a very formidable Super Bowl caliber team in Baltimore and were getting absolutely waxed for the first 3.5 quarters until they, kind of made the score salvageable at the end. But you're right. I don't think we can totally say, oh, this is all Mike McCarthy's fault, but you kind of knew what you were getting out of Mike McCarthy when you brought him into Dallas in the first place. We've seen this story plenty of times with Mike McCarthy in the past, Chief. So I don't think he's to blame. I also don't think he's the long-term answer. And maybe after the season, there is a friendly handshake and a mutual parting of the ways here, much like maybe with the Doug Peterson era in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, listen, I'd love to talk about every game, but let's do a look ahead here for time purposes. Then we could tie in some things that we saw this past weekend as well, because we didn't really talk about the Washington-Baltimore game, and those Commanders are at home against your Panthers this week. So let's start there. Kind of tie this in for me. Talk about what you saw at Daniels. Talk to me what you saw at Baltimore, and what kind of ownership are you expecting out of these Commanders against your Panthers this week, too?
Look, man, if I'm assuming Brian Robinson will be close this week. If he doesn't play, then obviously I'm going right back to Eckler. Eckler was a guy that I did like. He did get involved in the passing game, like we thought. Luke's just, couldn't quite put it together, get in the end zone, so forth and so on. But if Robinson's back, this run game should take off, and Jayden Daniels is obviously a part of their run game. I'm expecting Washington to win. I'm not expecting the Panthers to go into Washington and pull off the W here. One of the things we mentioned last week, Luch, and I think I asked you this question, facing Baltimore, how would your stance be on the Commanders if the game was competitive? And clearly we saw a competitive football game, 30-23, like that. Clearly that was close enough to me against a team that we feel like is a Super Bowl contender to say, hey, Washington's probably coming, right? Washington feels like the Texans from last year, Luch, right? Not, haven't really been in the thick of things in a while, but are ascending due to, quarterback play and maybe making some organizational changes, right? So we saw Dan Quinn get the hire at Washington. I didn't think that was the right hire, but clearly it's paying off dividends as he's brought in, the quarterback whisperer himself. And, so you saw something similar last year in Texas, bringing in DeMeco Ryans, carving out a great defense, and CJ Stroud coming in and picking up things quickly. And all of a sudden, the team starts to take off, right? And that's what I feel like we're seeing with Washington. And so I think they beat the Panthers here. I don't think the Panthers go into Washington and get a W here. I'm not saying the Commanders win by 20, but clearly the Commanders have been able to score points. So I think points will be scored in this game. And not to take away from the Panthers, Luch, who have been productive in their own right with Deontay Johnson, with Chuba Hubbard. So I think the Panthers should be able to put up some numbers here. I just don't think they win the football game. And this is another good game this week for fantasy purposes, I believe.
I'm still not sure if Dan Quinn was the right long-term hire, but what I can tell you is, and this kind of parlays quadruple downs with our previous conversation, and Richie, fire something at us here, man, in the chat, but Cliff Kingsbury has done a bang-up job as the OC. Maybe he wasn't a head coach at the NFL level, but his kind of relationship with Jayden Daniels seems to be fitting like a glove. Maybe it's more of Jayden Daniels making it look like Dan Quinn was the right hire, and maybe he was. I don't know. I'm just saying I'm not ready to say, oh, Dan Quinn, next 15 years build the statue in DC. But Jayden Daniels, 2 turnovers in his first 6 games out as a professional. And don't get it twisted. He is a major part, of why this team is what they're doing and where they are. And, flowers to Cliff Kingsbury so far early on in the season as well. Just night and day from what Washington had last season in terms of quarterback play and what they can do at the position, and the play calling has been pretty good. And Terry McLaurin's alive for fantasy purposes. It's about time. We had some Scary Terry squarely on the radar.
Listen, I wish Scary Terry had one more target yesterday. Had him over 7.5. Only got 7. Could have easily swung the other way. So, it's good that he's getting quality or at least enough volume to be relevant. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like some of those years he just wasn't getting enough opportunities to be relevant. I think sometimes we forget just how good he can actually be. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. I'm with you. I think the Commanders will be popular, and they should be. That seems like, the right plays. I love that Atlanta side. If, they're not out of control, popular, everyone is still affordable. Bijan up to 71. Could even crack 100 yards against Carolina, but he did score twice at 25 DK points.
But Tyler Algier also went nuts, right?
Correct.
In terms of being a backup running. And I talked about this, Luke, like,
game script, volume.
Right. An interesting play, yeah.
Yep. So I do like that. But we talked about, Joe Flacco and the Colts situation, and he's such a difference maker for making these pass catchers relevant that if he does get the nod, he's 6K. I love Josh Downs at that price. Just when he's been healthy and he's had Flacco, just massive volume, 30 targets across the last 3 games. He had a touchdown yesterday. He's had at least 15 DK points in every game he's played in since week 4. It just does a 180, and it kind of not flips the slate entirely, but puts all these GPP darts into play. He loves Alec Pierce. Pierce almost caught another bomb yesterday. He came up with a goose egg on the box score, but that's what you get when you're playing a guy like Alec Pierce. So, again, I think it doesn't sound like Tua is going to play this week, but that could mean some extra drives for Indianapolis against a defense that's been pretty underwhelming as well. So I think the Colts are just in another spot where, not everybody wants to commit to Joe Flacco and these guys on a main slate, but I'll go back to him if he's getting the start.
Yeah, and they're at home, and so I totally get it. Luke, I'm just going to kind of spray some games, if you will. I think these are all quality football games this week for me. Lions, Vikings, NFC North matchup, both teams playing really well. Lions coming off just a throttling of the Dallas Cowboys. Vikings obviously still undefeated, Luke. So an undefeated team with a division rival coming into town that seems to be getting their mojo rolling here. This should be a competitive game. It could also be a high-scoring game. Both of these offenses should be able to put up some points. So I think that's an interesting one. I did check the pricing, and none of these guys are like overly expensive, so I'm fine with that game. I talked about Seahawks Falcons. That's probably one of my bigger ones this week. I do want to see where ownership lands, but I think a sneaky good game, and maybe people still play it. You talked about Panthers Commanders, which I think people are going to be interested in, but on the main slate, Texans Packers. I mean, this should be a really fast-paced game, Luch, and like they're going to be quality pieces that you can get in from either side here. Like you got Jordan Love, you got CJ Stroud. Obviously, we saw the impact that Joe Mixon made coming right back and is putting up a monster fantasy score here on yesterday's slate or on the Sunday main slate contest. But Texans Packers, 2 competitive teams, and 2 young quarterbacks that can sling it. And I want to see where the ownership lands, but as of right now, Lions, Vikings, Seahawks, Falcons, Texans, Packers, Panthers, Commanders feel like, Luch, some really big football games. Obviously, Chiefs, 49ers, Super Bowl rematch, 2 competitive teams. But in terms of, just what I feel like could be overall just a scoring fiasco possibly, those Panthers, Commanders, Texans, Packers, Seahawks, Falcons, and Lions, Vikings, in terms of both sides, I think it could be some really nice fantasy performances. Love those teams. I love those games, rather. And there are definitely some pieces to be had from
So right now, Panthers Commanders, you have a 52 game total with the Commanders 7.5 point favorite. So massive implied team total there for the Commanders. Atlanta, Seattle, you're looking at a 50 game total right now and a 3-point spread. So could be points on both sides there as well. At least Vegas believes so. 47.5 total. Green Bay and Houston. This Minnesota Detroit game is obviously the game of the week for many reasons, but just it's going to be really fascinating. Minnesota had some rest. Aiden Hutchinson, hope the guy's doing well or better than he was, 12 hours ago. But brutal injury in terms of X's and O's is a major part of what Detroit does. And both of these teams have been pretty damn good against the run. So I like Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson in this matchup. Brian Flores, we've been talking a lot about him on the show, just the wonders and he's been doing with this Vikings defense and the sophisticated, exotic stuff he's been doing. I mean, just keeping the opposing quarterback guessing until he's snapping the ball, bringing safeties up to the line, rotating them as the clock's winding down. Just master of disguise, Brian Flores is here. So, excuse me. Detroit, very reliant on this run game and the play action stuff with Jared Goff. Curious to see how he fares if he's forced to drop back and throw more than he wants to or should be. What do you have, like 50 pass attempts against Tampa Bay a couple weeks ago? And that game was kind of underperforming. And that historically, Tampa is 55 passing attempts against Tampa Bay, and he hasn't thrown the ball more than 28 times in any other game this series. That's some massive positive game scripts. Listen, Tampa Bay's defense not good. Historically, they've been a funnel, though, in terms of stopping the run the past couple of years. Vita Vea and company up front, the last couple of seasons. But, maybe this is a Amon-Ra, Jefferson, Darnold kind of week. It's expensive. Those two pass catches are expensive. But I can't wait to see the chess game between Brian Flores and then, of course, Ben Johnson and what type of situation, in terms of play calling, Detroit's going to be maybe forced into. Hopefully they get up early so they can kind of stay in their wheelhouse and run some of those play fakes and design stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. And let me just say, I'm going back to last week for a minute, but I just want to say the Detroit Lions scored 47 points yesterday, and Amon-Ra had like 3 or 4 catches and a touchdown. Like,
unbelievable.
I was so disappointed in the performance from him, but once again, I mean, the team game. I mean, Jameson Williams got a big touchdown early and kind of got his fantasy points out of the way. And I'm sitting here looking at Amon-Ra at one point. I think he had 3 catches for 33 yards or something, and I'm like, oh my gosh! But Detroit took care of business, and I will say I do think in this Minnesota game. As good as the Houston Texans are on offense, I think the Detroit Lions are a different style of offense. You get what I'm saying? They're a different style, a little bit more of a power puncher. And so we're going to see quickly, if this Minnesota defense and Brian Flores are for real. And if they come out of this thing, if they're still undefeated after this week, I think everybody's going to have some interesting things to say about the Minnesota Vikings as a whole. But this should be one of the better games of the week, just to watch. You know what I mean?
Well, Chief Amon-Ra got the Mike Evans treatment. You see a bajillion points in that game. You think, well, let me open up my app and see what Mike Evans, 6 targets, 2 catches. It was the Chris Godwin show. And the Sean Tucker matinee with the Chris Godwin 7 p.m. show. It's what it was. It's where the offense was.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do like this week, Luch. I think, and I did have the pricing pulled up. I checked it earlier. So for those of you that are interested in like quarterback pricing early, Jayden Daniels is the most expensive quarterback this week at 7,600. I think he's earned that with this matchup coming up with the Panthers. I think that's somewhat of a dynamic pricing going on there. But he was 7,300, I think it was, against Baltimore. So I think he's earned the price increase given the spot. Guys that I think are interestingly priced this week, Luch. Geno Smith, 5,800, going up against Atlanta. They're still in a dome here, and I'm expecting Atlanta to kind of get out early. So we've seen him have these huge connections with DK Metcalf seemingly early in the first quarter of a lot of these games this year, Luch. He's hitting DK's for some big ones. So I like Geno Smith quite a bit so far as we roll out the pricing. I also like Sam Darnold quite a bit at 6,200 at home in that same Detroit game. I think that's a good price. I know you mentioned Flacco at 6K. I agree there. Brock Purdy in a game where he may have to throw it a little bit also at 6,400. I think that's interesting. Like Goff at 65. I talked about it yesterday. My sweet spot was kind of the 6K range, and it's something similar this week also, but I am going to get the Stroud and Love. At least that's what I'm planning to do right now. So at quarterback, I do think, with all these games out there, there's some interesting targets because I don't feel like any of them are extremely overpriced.
This might seem like a yucky click, as you like to call it, but if we do get Malik Neighbors back, I don't hate Daniel Jones. I don't hate a Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors. If you want to play Barkley, cool. But man, I'm kind of on the AJ Brown train. I think again this week. I know they're gonna probably do some extra things to get Saquon some more touches. That for sure. But man, if you're gonna get some projected ownership leverage with AJ Brown, if people are paying up for Barkley, and I mean, this is like the juiciest narrative we've probably seen all season. You have Kyron Williams back on the slate in a great spot as well. I don't know. I guess I'm a little conflicted. I don't know what kind of ownership we're going to see on AJ Brown. I mean, you have Justin Jefferson at the top at 8,500 as well. Maybe we get Cooper Kupp back. Who knows?
Yeah. DK Metcalf, 6,800 going up against Atlanta. We've seen him have some games with double-digit targets. And Luch, late in that San Francisco game, had about a 60-yard touchdown call back, which would have really boosted his fantasy production. That would have been an extra 13 points or so. Outside of that touchdown, we're going to have some interesting situations. Deontay Johnson only up to 6,600, another massive target game. It was just a blip on the radar the week before when they had 6 targets against Chicago. That game just kind of got out of hand. 10 targets last week, which is what we expect from a number one option. 6 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown. So once again, Luch, we've got some interesting guys in this 6K range, upper 5K range that, we'll have at our disposal again this week. And I think it's another great week for DFS. Another great week.
Yeah, the Eagles-Giants game only has a 43.5 total, but perhaps there might be no more enticing potential fill-ins like Tyrone Tracy, who probably will end up starting by the end of the year. And Darius Slayton, 11 more targets last night, got about a 60-plus yard play wiped off due to an illegal ineligible receiver downfield where Andrew Thomas just went a little bit too far on an RPO, which hurt my heart a little bit because I had some Slayton alt totals, and he ended up with 60 some odd yards, and he I think would have cracked 100 plus for sure if that play stood. But again, I think you can play these guys against the Eagles who, depending on what side of the bed Vic Fangio wakes up and how he decides to adjust and game plan for, I have no problem playing Darius Slayton at 5,100 if Malik Neighbors is out. And if you are low on the Eagles defense, you get a pretty cheap stack with Daniel Jones and Darius Slayton. I know it's not the most appetizing thing on the planet, but if the duo hook up for a touchdown and you get 50, rushing yards out of Daniel Jones, that kind of allows you to, pay a premium at these other positions to go get your Justin Jefferson. If you want to play Saquon Barkley with them, go for it. So probably spending a little bit too much time on Daniel Jones and the Giants. It's Monday. Those are just some thoughts that are coming alive right here.
The offense, I don't know. So first of all, they missed 2 field goals in the fourth quarter in that game facing Cincinnati, but lose. We see Cincinnati win that game, but if you didn't watch the game, you don't realize that Cincinnati was up 7-0 for most of that game. I think even into the third quarter, fourth quarter, and finally the Giants were able to get some points on the board. But the Giants team was very competitive. They just could not finish drives. They couldn't finish drives. Dable went for it, a couple times on fourth down and converted. And like I said, they missed some field goals, and it screwed up. I think it just kind of screwed up the mojo. But I'm perfectly fine with you talking about this Giants team. I mean, we've seen them be relevant in fantasy, and Luch, that's what we're looking for. Why did we play Blake Bortles 6 years ago? We didn't play Blake Bortles because he was good. We played him because there was this interesting fantasy relevancy that would occur late in football games. He just starts slinging it around and not thinking of it and pile up fantasy points for $5,000, $4,800. And, the media has made Daniel Jones out to be a terrible quarterback, and he's probably somewhere closer to average than terrible, which is why the fantasy production continues to show up.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think Saquon goes bonkers this week, you should be interested in, Darius Slayton if Neighbors is out and that kind of thing. Pretty condensed target share there between him and Wan'Dale right now.
And look, and he missed Wan'Dale early in that game, wide open on a kind of a deep post route, if you will. Just overthrew him slightly. If they hit that, maybe that changes the complexity of the game. Luke, they miss a fumble recovery late in that game, right? Chase Brown's running. They punch it out. They fall on it. It kind of squirts out of one guy's hands. The other guy tries to fall on it, and it squirts out of bounds. Like, if they get that play, if that play falls their way, that changes the outcome of the game. So, I know sometimes, when we're talking about it, and we can't watch every game, but the ones we get to watch, we get to kind of see how things unfold. And the Giants aren't as bad as we think they were, or as maybe we thought they were going to be this season. They've been competitive. I'm not saying they're going to the playoffs or going to light the world on fire, but I am saying they're a few plays away from winning some of these football games.
I agree. I would like to. There's two more talking points I have, and then we'll start wrapping up. Yeah. Let me hit on one of them, and then I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. Because I don't have any more talking points. I hit on all my talking points already.
Mark Andrews. He did. Had the game at super low ownership. I'm not saying he's going to do it again, but he ran one more route than Isaiah Likely. He ran 16 routes to Isaiah Likely's 15. And he's priced like a guy who's splitting time. But he had the game. He had the big touchdown. He's not dead. He's just not who he used to be. So I think he's still priced fairly. So shout out if you played Mark Andrews. And lastly, they're not on this week's slate, but I want to mention that he had and excuse me while I plug my computer charger in here, folks, if I lose you on the screen. But
and while Drake May, go ahead.
Injected some life into that team, and Demario Douglas appears to be by far his favorite target. They're not on this week's main slate, but Demario Douglas with Drake May, obviously super negative game script, trailed to Houston most of the game, the whole game basically. 24% target share, 38% air yard share for Pop Douglas, as they call him. Maybe he's a sneaky look going forward in DFS and on future slates and those waiver wire ads coming up.
Yeah, could be for sure. And speaking of Andrews, Kelce slowly creeping back up in price because he's now back to being the number one option. It saw double-digit targets, I think it was last week. If it wasn't 10, it was 9, and it's starting to be productive again. I still don't think he should be priced higher than Brock Bowers, but here we are. And Brock Bowers is cheaper than Kelce. How much ownership do we think Kelce gets this week when everybody in the mom knows that he's going to be Patrick Mahomes' favorite target again?
Yeah, I mean, he's an obvious cash game play, I think. Super high floor, not egregiously priced, like you said. I think that's a really good point. You said you had no more talking points. Look at you coming up with one. I love it. You're absolutely right. I mean, high floor, high ceiling Travis Kelce is back. And I really can't put a number on what his projected ownership might be. One more I wanted to get into real quick.
And I was going to mention this too, Luke. I was going to mention this too. Don't look now. Kyle Pitts, 3 catches for 70 yards yesterday, starting to be consistently productive. We all thought he was dead. The minute he gets into the end zone now, Luke, he's going to be close to a 15 to 20 point tight end score, which is more than enough this season to help you take down a tournament. Wanted to also slide him in because his production is picking up. I talked about the fact that he's had that big playability, and I feel like Kirk Cousins is starting to unlock that. So, Luch, past couple weeks, and by couple I do mean 2, but in 3 of the last 4 games has had at least 1 catch of 30 yards or more. In 3 of the last 4. Last in Tampa Bay had his longest catch was 32 yards, but he had 8 catches for 88 yards. At Carolina, longest catch was 52 yards, 3 catches for 70. I'm here to tell you the big Kyle Pitts game is coming. And so it would behoove us to go ahead and get on board, Luch, when nobody else wants to get on board with Kyle Pitts, because we've been so used to, no ceiling. But ceiling is right around the corner with the big plays that look like they're on the way.
Also, my last point is in terms of pricing, and this week, I don't have the historical pricing in front of me on Tyreek Hill, but I don't know when the last time he was priced at 7,300 was. It could be his rookie season. I don't know. Of course, you have some bad quarterback play there with Mr. Huntley now.
But it was better the second week than it was the first week.
And it's a bad Colts defense. At one point, does McDaniel scheme something up? And listen, I whiffed with my Calvin Ridley shares yesterday. The difference is Calvin Ridley, he needs a dot. He needs accurate, deep passes to score his points. Tyreek Hill could take an end around for 80 yards. Tyreek Hill can, make it happen on some bubble screens. You can get this guy the ball in different ways with bad quarterback play. And man, he is just bottoming out at that $7,300 price range on DK, where you just have to think eventually he's going to exceed value even with poor quarterback play. I mean, the Dolphins need a jolt, and I would be dumbfounded if Tyreek didn't make some kind of big splash play this week. Somehow, some way, Mike McDaniel, if you're as big as a commodity as I thought you once were, you're going to figure out a way to get this guy ball for him to find the end zone this week, I think.
Okay, Luch. So here's the thing. In football, sometimes you just have to look at the basic stuff. And typically, targets are going to be a pretty good indicator of where production may be heading. Now, they played New England. He had 6 catches for 69 yards, no touchdowns. 6, but he had 9 targets, Luke. That was week 2 of the Tyler Huntley experience. Bye week, then now we're coming into, his 3rd week of Huntley. So now Huntley's had way more time to prepare, a lot more time to get into the film, a lot more time to connect with Tyreek and Waddle. And if Tyreek is going to get 9 to 10 targets, Luch, the production is coming. And like we talk about, all targets aren't created equal. And this is a guy that can take a 5-yard play slant to the house, a 5-yard out to the house. I'm with you. 7,300. We need to have some Tyreek Hill shares. I also think we need to have some Jalen Waddle shares, who's been cheap as well, Luke. So, while we're sitting here talking about him, do you don't want to know what Jalen Waddle's price is? It's 5,300.
Yeah, I mean,
he had 8 targets the week before, 4 catches for 46 yards. Once again, Luke, let's go see. I didn't even check on Huntley's price, and I know Yeezy's saying that Tua could come back. I think Tua just needs to stay out of this thing. Huntley's 5,100. Luke, as long as Tua doesn't come back, I think Huntley, Tyreek, and Waddle stacks might actually show up in a few of my bills this week. I think that stack is cheap enough, and you can run it back with Downs and still be fine. Or you could just run Flacco, who we trust, with Downs.
I like Flacco
and run Tyreek and Waddle on the other side, or one or the other. Either way, they're both cheap enough. If Tyreek gets you at this price, Luke, if Tyreek gets you 25 and Waddle gets you 18, great.
I think I'd play one of them. I don't know if I'd play both. I think a lot of things would have to go right. A lot more than they already. A lot more things than they already would have to.
Here's how it goes right, Luke. Here's how it goes right. I know we got to get out of here. Here's how it goes right. Tyreek gets an early 60-yard touchdown. Let's call it 60. Off a basic play, right? Nothing extravagant. They throw it to him in some way. He finds a way to weasel out, and he turns on the burners. 60-yard play for a touchdown about 5 minutes into the game. So he's got roughly 13 fantasy points off one target. He picks up, 5 or 6 more catches, Luch, for 40 yards. So now let's call it 6 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. Right? So just off that alone, what is that? 25. That's the 25 we need, right? And Waddle has something like 4 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. Remember, we're talking about the pricing. Now, that's not slate breaking, right? That's not slate breaking, but it is enough when he's 5,300. And then maybe, just maybe, Huntley throws for 2 touchdowns for 180 and rushes for 30 yards and a rushing touchdown. Just maybe. And all of a sudden, this stat has taken off against a defense that you have said, and obviously the statistics also say it's not very good.
I think
I'm not trying to force you into Miami. I'm just saying at these prices, there is
I don't know if I'm full stack in Miami, but I will use pieces. And I think the kicker is A-Chain going to clear concussion protocol against a defense where I watched Tony Pollard, who looks fantastic this year, with my own eyes, score a touchdown on a 3rd and 19 delayed draw play on Sunday. So I think he could muck up your double Waddle Hill synopsis here. But at the same time, if they get a lead, and if A-Chain's the guy that gives them the lead, they're going to want to protect Tyler Huntley and take care of the football. If this guy's healthy and gets cleared, it could be an A-Chan under-owned week in an interesting spot. I mean, I just can't see that many people rushing to click his name. I don't know. Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading this wrong.
All right. And then Luch, before we close this thing out, I'm introducing a new segment right now. I'm introducing a new segment because I know I believe Luch has some in. And Luch, if you don't, that's okay. How is your best ball team doing this season?
Oh, I'd have to check, but I will get back to you on that. Do you have anything that's really kicking some behind right now?
I've got a couple, actually. So I was just wondering, where you were. Obviously, Luch, we still got a long way to go. I do have one team that's probably, at least with the people I'm playing against, it's probably slightly over 100 points ahead of the field that I'm in, prior to us getting to the playoffs, so forth and so on. And let me see what that team is. And I did 9 best ball drafts this year, Luch, just 9, nothing crazy. And out of those 9, I think I've got 4 or 5 that are slated to advance. So yeah, I've got one. This is my best ball team. My best ball team is currently, I have 759.2 points. And I think that's that might not be my best one. Let me check. Don't want to lie to the people, Luch. Going back here. No, my best ball team has 796 points. 796.46, and I am 130 points ahead of second place.
Nice.
Currently.
Underdog or DK? Or
Underdog. So look, Luch, some things have had to fall my way with this team. I tried to draft, interestingly enough. I've kind of avoided some of the injuries, if you will, some of them. So on this team, I only have 2 quarterbacks. It's Baker Mayfield and Bo Nix. Those are the 2 quarterbacks I have. But at running back, Luch, here's who I have at running back: Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift. Those are my running backs for the team. So I've avoided the injury bug pretty well and ended up with a really good running back group here on this one. And then at wide receiver, I'm not strong at receiver, but I have enough. So I have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Brandon Cooks, who is injured, Demario Douglas, Greg Dortch, DJ Chark, Troy Franklin. And then I've got TJ Hawkinson, who I'm expecting to come back. So I drafted him knowing he was out, and Dawson Knox. I got those guys late. But that's my best team. And I've just had the guys that have had some monster performances along the way. So it's worked out fairly well. But that's my best team in terms of scoring so far.
Yeah, chat. If you guys got any teams that are cooking, let's hear about it in the comments. Throw them in there. Just real quick, I have my highest scoring underdog team is a team that I don't usually draft in terms of like build. It's like a hyper fragile RB build. I have 4 running backs loaded up on receiver. I went dual running back with Bijan and Derrick Henry, and my other 2 running backs are currently worthless. So I don't think this will sustain, but I have Zeke and Kendre Miller as the other 2. Kendre Miller. And I loaded up at receiver. Nico, Terry McLaurin, Jayden Reed, Chris Godwin, Jameson Williams, A.D. Mitchell, and Darius Slayton and Jalen McMillan. I have Jayden Daniels and Baker Mayfield on it. And I have Jake Ferguson and also TJ Hawkinson. Again, I don't draft many teams. I'm a typical like a hero RB guy this year or just a punt 0 RB guy. Rarely do I have like a dual running back build with Bijan and Derrick Henry, but that's what I do. I figured that's where, I'm going to need this team to stay healthy. So if I do end up going 2 running backs early, I'm going to just play for the ceiling, grab like maybe 2 backups, 4 or 5 running backs at most. And this is a build I don't really condone or recommend, but you play for week 15, 16, 17. Right. And so I loaded up elsewhere, and I'm hoping that just Bijan and Henry stay healthy the whole year. And if they do, maybe the thing's got a shot. If they don't, hopefully my builds where I built completely different. I have some survivors when playoff time rolls around.
And I will say this, Luch, when I was building this year, believe it or not, I was purposefully trying to get Henry. I was purposefully trying to get Saquon. So Henry, Saquon, Kamara had just had good value. I was getting him earlier than most, but later than I felt like he should have gone. Yeah. So Kamara was a guy I was able to get. Yeah, I was able to get him a fair amount. Yeah, I have Kamara and Henry in most of my like teams that are winning right now, and I was really high on DeAndre Swift, getting him late. DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones; those are kind of 2 of my later running backs, if you will, that I was really high on. I feel like, and I know we got to close this thing out. Talking best ball, it's a DFS show. I feel like I kind of whiffed on Amon-Ra in a general sense. Like I sided with Amon-Ra in most of my drafts. I felt like I was drafting 5th. I feel like I had the 5th pick like almost every time in every best ball draft that I had. So I sided with Amon-Ra over AJ Brown most times. And Amon-Ra's going to have some games. Don't get me wrong. He's had one, I think, really big game so far this season, but he hasn't had what I felt like was going to be a stable, 17, 18 most weeks, 15, 18 most weeks with upside for 25, 30.
Well, Chief, I will say about Amon-Ra, they've had some really positive game scripts, and it's early. And you know what? He might underperform. He might underperform during the best ball regular season, but he might be the guy you need to advance in one of the playoff rounds, and he makes it totally worth it. So, objectively, of course, there are ways to gauge your success with how you did during best ball when you look at your plus or minus totals in terms of entry fees. But it's tough when you really dig through the weeds, like. If you don't have that guy that gets you through the playoff rounds, you don't have, correlation has been a hot topic throughout the season and the summer. How much correlation do you have? There's so many different strategies and so many different takes that it's so hard to really gauge your success on your process. And of course, it's almost like a war of nutrition at this point. It's been brutal for injuries, and it's almost like a flatter portfolio might actually have been the move this year, instead of guys taking 70, 80% of one guy who does 800 drafts, and then you're probably dead. At least your ceiling is probably capped, because I'm sure you're drafting 80% of a guy who is useful in the first 6 rounds. And let's not hope it's like, 90% of an 18th round guy on whatever site you're drafting. But we'll see, man. It's definitely been a battle so far, and we'll check back in a couple of weeks when we get closer to those playoff rounds.
Yeah, maybe we do it every 5 weeks, maybe. Because if we do it I guess we already passed week 5. But maybe we check back in at week 10 and just kind of see how it's going. Because then we're about 4 weeks from the playoffs, 3 weeks roughly. You might think the playoffs at that point.
I would love to get Buying for a Rob on the show as we get closer.
Yeah.
And fire up some of that.
Let's make that happen. Steve, Devin, I don't think Buying for a Rob would mind coming on talking with, especially as we get close and just talk through, as we get geared up for the playoffs, like how exciting is it? How some of their teams might be looking. That'd be some fun stuff.
They do just a phenomenal job, top of the industry over there at Spike Week. So if you don't know what Spike Week is, I mean, as much best ball content for multiple sports and fantastic tools where you can really dive into your portfolio and check out some things you didn't know you were doing, and really help you pick up on some trends as you grind out best ball throughout the summer months. Gotta love it. But I guess we do have to get out of here. So I just want to give a quick shout out to producer Steve. Good luck to your Mets, who are in a 1-0 series hole so far. So maybe we'll get a Subway series, and we will see what happens. But Chief, what do you got before we get out of here?
Nothing much. I'm good, man. You guys know I'll be on later in the week on the Blitz show. I'll probably be on with Blender on RotoGrinders today as we talk through some props and pick them, before things spike up a little bit too much. I'll be on Sunday. I've been on Crunch Time this year, which has been fantastic. I've had a great time on Crunch Time with you guys. And, of course, myself and TJ Swartz get spicy on the Pre-Lock show for Sunday Showdown, Sunday Night Football. So I'll see you guys then. And, man, thanks so much for joining us all the time, guys. We love you. And we're really appreciative that you guys take time out your day to listen to us talk about DFS football for a little while.
Yeah, and just some football stuff and things that matter outside of projected ownership and projections, and a lot goes into the product you see on the football field. Then we talk about offensive coordinators, we talk about trade deadline, we talk about all that stuff here on the show. So hopefully you're into what we got here, because like my guy here, Chief, says, this isn't your mama's podcast at all. So with that said, appreciate y'all for hanging out with us another week in the books. That's the Chief. I'm the Luch. Shout out to producer Steve, and we'll see you next week.